Venue IQ, the award-winning UK-based event platform, are proud to partner this podcast series. We really hope you enjoy it, and when you're done, head over to venu-iq.com to find out all about our on-demand event builder service, featuring fully branded native apps and hybrid web platforms created in as little as 24 hours. We believe in live events and getting your audience to the most important content, sponsors, exhibitors and opportunities as quickly and as easy as possible. We don't believe in gimmicks, so you won't find any avatars or digital buildings anywhere in sight. Venue IQ had already won awards for best conference technology and best use of AI, and that was before we added registration, live streaming, one-to-one video meetings, video breakout sessions and much more. Simple, transparent pricing that won't blow your budget from a UK-based team who really care. At Venue IQ, we work to ensure your event, whether live, virtual or both, can be a monumental success in this brave new world. That's venu-iq.com. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of the Event Industry News podcast. I am joined by a fellow Mancunian, Ben Robinson today, Festival Director of Bluedot Festival. For those that don't know, Bluedot is a music, science and cultural festival which takes place every July up here at Jodrell Bank University in North Cheshire. And today, Ben's here to actually talk about their transition into doing a weekend in outer space, which was a free-to-view online weekend hosted by Bluedot Festival at the end of last month, and we are now recording this podcast in August. So Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, good to be here.
Good to have you on. I like a fellow Mancunian because I tend to interview lots of Londoners and Southerners and people all around the world. So you might be the first, actually.
Just to be fully honest, I'm actually Cumbrian, born and bred, but resident in Manchester, as it's kind of the hive for the northwest of all the music and creativity. But
Absolutely.
very close to home, and is home Manchester now.
So was it festival and events that brought you up to the north then?
No, so Cumbria is even further north than Manchester. So,
I'm still thinking down south, mate.
There you go. A lot of people think it's in Europe and somewhere else, but yeah, Cumbria is where I began, in a little village where I grew up, with a huge passion for music. You kind of had to make your own fun where I grew up, and I got into playing guitar, got into putting on nights.
Yeah.
Just watched a lot of music documentaries, grew up buying Definitely Maybe as my first record, went to Loch Lomond, which was the week before Nebworth, as my first outdoor concert I ever went to. I was just hooked by the energy, of those times. It was intoxicating, and just wanted to be in a band, and if I couldn't be in a band, wanted to be involved in music in some way, shape or form. Kind of knew that from going to my first full festival the year after Loch Lomond in 96, I think 97, I think I went down to V97 when it was still at Temple Newsome, I think at the time, outside Leeds, which eventually became Leeds Festival site before that moved on again. Came back from there and was just like, I just never want to come home from festivals, I just want to be in a festival. I've got that really distinct memory of arriving home and kind of not sitting on a chair or on the bed, but sitting on the floor and kind of just trying to still be in that camping environment. So yeah, I guess that those couple of summers, Loch Lomond is a major event, first time away from home by myself, and then V97, which was, still to this day, bizarrely, if I could book V97's lineup for Kendal Calling next year, biggest, most massive thing ever. It's insane to look at those old bills and how those bands have carried, they've carried on their kind of being huge live incredible artists, the likes of Underworld, Chemical Brothers, things like that, which, in a way actually took two of our headliners to bluedot eventually. Yeah.
So how did then you get involved with bluedot? Was it you that came up with the concept? Did you launch the festival? How did you become festival director at bluedot?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because you put on the questions, how did you become a festival director? And I actually, because I thought, I don't think it's a funny thing becoming a festival director, because I don't know that you really apply for that job. It's, for all the festival directors that I know, that they have gotten involved through some huge amount of passion and ingenuity into doing things which have developed and evolved and become festivals and communities around those festivals. So for me, my story starts with me being in Cumbria, having gone to university, came back, bummed out, learned how to play guitar, and listened to a lot of music. Thought, I don't know what I want to do myself, but it's got to be something to do with music still.
Yeah.
Kind of continued that passion through. Played in a few bands. All my mates went travelling. Couldn't afford to go travelling because I bummed out of uni, spent all my money. Decided to put some gigs on. Basically thought I'm not just going to work the job that I had, which was driving me insane and was rather dull. So threw everything into putting some gigs on. Was lucky enough to get on a promoter mentoring scheme, which was run by Jim Maudsley and Generator. They were good enough to notice that Cumbria was lacking an infrastructure and a scene, so they did a project which put together wannabe promoters or promoters from around Cumbria to share artists to kind of get a mini touring circuit going throughout Cumbria. So Cumbria is actually the most spread out county in the country in terms of population. It's the most spread out. So that's kind of challenging working up there, getting audiences with it being so kind of really spread out. Through that, met Andy Smith, who was a kind of 16, 17-year-old promoter doing stuff in Kendal. And me and Andy thought, let's do a bigger gig. Put a gig on together at Rue Arts Centre for 300 people. That sold out. Couldn't find a bigger venue, so thought let's put a tent in a field. And that was Kendal Calling. And going from being a promoter who really wanted to start a label more than anything, suddenly ended up running a festival, becoming a festival director. And then Kendal Calling grew from 900 capacity, kind of 2-day thing in the middle of Kendal, moved out to a farm over 2 years, grew up to 4,000 with 3 days in camping. Went through a horrendous mud years, started to learn about the need for trackway when things get muddy. Had some experiences of putting
paths and all that kind of stuff.
Service. You just kind of learn how to trade, and we often look back and go, I'm so glad social media didn't exist back then, because some of the learnings that we had now would have been 300-400 negative tweets online. There's a certain development, I think, of the boutique festival as an industry and as a profession over the last 10 years. It's kind of a lot of learning on the job for everyone involved, with things like Festival, Secret Garden Party, Big Chill, kind of, becoming the big names and establishing kind of those formats. But again, I think, thinking about the people that run those, they were just people who were like, oh, let's throw a cool party for us now, mates. Oh, this is going quite well. Let's make it a bit bigger. Oh, let's have some camping. And then somewhere along the lines, you're like, wow, I'm a festival director. You turn out sitting behind gigantic spreadsheets, sales. Trying now to wrestle with Live Nation, who I didn't know really existed, around artist exclusivities, and I'm getting shouted at by bands managers. I used to love that band, but now they've kind of taken the edge off because I've fallen out with them somewhere.
Interesting, mate. Yeah, I guess it's the same as everybody, I guess, in the events industry. I feel like event organizer as an overriding term should, underneath it, the definition of I fell into it, because that's kind of like how everybody, I know there are event management courses out there and they're great, run by universities and other institutions that help people get a start. But from my experience of talking to individuals like yourself, those people that run some of the biggest things that we see didn't necessarily actively mean to get to where they are. They just had a passion for events, festivals, bringing people together, more importantly, showing people a good time. And then have probably learnt very quickly around upskilling themselves around project management and team management and health and safety and all those, really important things that a lot of the world don't see that go on behind the scenes, right? All that delivery, all that planning, all the checking off that everybody's safe and well and looked after. From a consumer perspective, they just see a lot of cool bands in a field playing music and everybody having a good time, and they don't realise the scope of work that goes behind it, right?
It's that classic thing of, up until a few years ago, I still had friends asking me what I did for the other 50 years, weeks of the year. And then actually recently I had a couple of old friends who are builders and carpenters came to help out on the week of the show and just stood there in absolute shock. And they were like, this is insane. I can't believe how much is going on here. And I was like, well, yeah, we have to build the thing. You know what I mean? They were just looking at all of the trucks, the infrastructure, the crew, the fact that it's a construction site of quite scale, operating, in a very short time scale. And it was like, I just never really thought about it. You're right. I don't think many people do. They kind of, I guess, they don't see the field when it's empty and realise that within 6 weeks, you know, there's a temporary village with some of the most amazing kind of, you know, bells and whistles you'll find anywhere in society at festivals, you know.
Absolutely, mate. And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned construction there, because that's the way that I describe it to some of my friends, you know. But the major difference is you have an absolutely movable deadline. There is no like, oh, we'll just delay it by a week or a day because we've not got quite things in place how we want to. It's like it has to be ready for gates opening, right? And everything has to be checked off. Whereas if you're in construction, if somebody doesn't turn up or you don't get a delivery of something, it's kind of like, oh, well, we'll just crack on with that tomorrow and move on to something else. And, you know, construction we all know the horror stories of delays in construction and fines and stuff like that. So I almost think it's a harder job to do. And right, when people come from construction and see these events built in such a short time frame with so many moving parts, I do think they are taken aback a little bit. I guess that brings me on to, what's it like being in your position right now where live events can't take place at the moment?
It's a very good question. It's kind of like every other day, to be honest, only a lot harder. So, you know, from being a festival organizer over the last 10 or 15 years, there's just always something new. There's never been a set format. We've been part, I would tentatively say we've been part of developing the format of festivals in terms of how we produced, you know, shared best practice across an industry that has been developing and growing on every level, you know, in terms of how we do things, how we build things, how we market things.
Yep.
You know, when we did the first festivals, social media didn't exist, you know. Probably did the first 5 or 6 Kendal Callings where we put the photos up 2 weeks after the show. So, you know, we've had to develop into doing broadcasting on site at the time of the show. We've had to develop, you know, all these different things. So where we're at the minute, being a festival organizer, in a way, when this first happened and we went into lockdown, and you know, all bets were off on a normal summer, it was actually really, really inspiring and interesting to see our team just burst into creativity, going, right, well, can we do this instead? Can we do that instead? And it was like, wow, the innovation and the dynamics of the people that work in events is, I think, second to none. There's just this, like, as you said, there's a sense of urgency because we're used to a removable deadline. So it's not like, oh, we'll have a bit of a think about this and come to it later. You know, we know we have to move with the times. You have to move with audiences. You have to move with, you know, the commercial constraints of everything. So the flurry of activity that we had for the first couple of months was fantastic. And we looked at 101 other ideas. What else can we do this summer? How else can we do the festivals online? Obviously, we did that, and it was almost like a tidal wave of everyone in the industry doing it, going, okay, what else should we do? Suddenly everyone was talking about drive-in cinema. We kind of had a look at that for a while and then decided maybe it wasn't the right thing to jump in on. And then, so we're kicking around a load of ideas. Probably, you know, it's reminding me a little bit of the earlier years of the festivals before the formats for how the festivals were created, before the audiences were there and the staffing and the structure, because what we created with Kendal over the last 10 years and what we've then taken most of the good best practice from Kendal to create bluedot as its format in terms of budgeting, infrastructure, staffing, and how does a festival run. All that stuff's become quite kind of set in a way. And I think in the minute, it's almost like this huge reset of, okay, here's a whole new puzzle. How do we do an event kind of within this place? So it kind of jumped from mania and creativity to then just feeling like you're hitting brick walls, and then having a few days where you don't really know what to do, you know, and kind of the negative side of it kicks in. But I think we've all talked enough about the negative side, so I won't like dive into that today. But my main thing I keep going back to is the Muhammad Ali quote, and that's how it feels like this whole period, you know. Get knocked down 7 times, get up 8, and that's just every time we're looking at something at the minute. It's like, there will be something here, there will be something we can do, there will be new profitable models, you know, there will be a way through this, but it's not going to be obvious, so we've just got to keep at it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately as an industry, we are problem solvers, right? We, you know, every year when we turn up on a site, even if it's the same site or same venue that we've been to time and time again, things change because we're annual, right? You know, things change. So we have to overcome challenges and problems sometimes we can see those problems coming further out. Sometimes they're thrown at us right there in the thick of it, and you have to act. And I think that's what makes our industry so great, and which has made it so resilient at the moment to what's happening. Taking on your point of innovation, I almost feel like there's been 3 to 5 years of innovation in 3 or 4 months within our sector. Yeah. And the pause with the pressure has helped us to kind of, like you say, step back from what we've always done, or now what really works really well is a kind of, cogs turning in a machine, like, well, that really works, like, and we'll tweak that little bit this year because we know that didn't work really well that year. And most of the focus is then generally on like audience experience and the acts and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think it's a really interesting time. I really feel that as a sector, I'd like to see some more support from government for our sector, but as a sector, I think we'll come out of it much stronger with different business models and new innovation. And I actually even think that it might attract some bigger investment into the sector, because all of a sudden we're moving to these digital formats as well, which are sustainable, inclusive, and all that kind of stuff. I guess was that your primary driver then to launch a weekend in outer space? I know prior to the podcast you mentioned there were kind of like 3 main drivers. So
yeah, I mean, when we looked at it, as everybody did, that question was asked: Can we do these festivals as digital festivals, or can we? And we kind of looked at that, and we looked at what everybody else had done, and we kind of left it a bit. To be honest, we thought, we did an initial stream for fun to engage the audiences, but we realised how much effort and work is involved in that. And also, when you're streaming something online, you can't make an error because everyone will see it.
Yeah.
That level of stress, we had a look at, and then we went, and this was the start of lockdown. We tell you what, let's just pause the show, let's postpone it, and then let's get on with some other stuff, and then come back at this when we see what other people have done, and we feel what is the moment and what is the feeling. So when we came around to that point, we wanted to do something when the festival weekend would have been. And we wanted to do something to just take people's attention away from everything going on. So we came up with this idea of a weekend in outer space, because I was basically thinking, you kind of sit and you think, I could do getting away from all this and sitting on a beach somewhere. I'm like, well, I can't, because there's COVID there. There's COVID everywhere on the planet, excuse my French. I thought, well, there isn't COVID in outer space, so let's do a weekend in outer space. Do you know what I mean? Let's try and get away from this and get some perspective, a bit of escapism, because that's what festivals are about. They're about escapism. And so we framed it on that. We thought, let's do a weekend in outer space. Obviously, Bluedot's name comes from a piece by Carl Sagan, an astronomer and a poet, where he got the Voyager spacecraft to take a photograph from deep space looking backwards of the Earth. And when you look at that photograph, the Earth shows as like one tiny pixel in a sunbeam. And he framed it in this paragraph, or this really interesting poem, or whatever you want to call it, that everyone should read. He framed it as the pale blue dot. So the idea of that is having this perspective of the Earth looking back on it, that everything that's ever happened, everyone that's ever existed, has all been on this little dot, and it's actually quite a vulnerable little thing in outer space. So we thought, okay, let's play with that, because Blue Dot's all about outer space. Let's try and give people some perspective, because at the minute everything is so dramatic in the moment that we do need some perspective on how we're going to zoom out from this situation, and life will continue into the future. So yeah, that was the conceptual driver. It was, let's escape to outer space for a weekend, go and have a party in space.
Sounds good to me, mate. Yeah.
Why not? And then we had a look at, we wanted to engage the audience. We wanted to let them know that we were there with them. So we wanted to do something for the audience. We wanted to do something that our team could engage with, so that it felt like not everything we were doing was kind of hitting this brick wall of, oh, actually we can't do that because of regulations. It's like, let's do something we can be proud of. Do you know what I mean? Let's remind people and remind ourselves what Buedot is all about. And then we applied for some funding from the Arts Council, which gave us some funding to pay for the content. They basically were looking at set up a fund so that people could apply for it to cover some of their own overheads against losses, to keep the lights on, but also to filter funds very quickly through to artists. And they saw that, from the fields, which is Bluedot and Kendal Calling, and otherwise, we had the ability to get money to artists directly by giving them work straight off the bat.
Yep.
So that was nice. So that allowed us to do it for free. We thought, let's do it as a free event. Let's use it to engage people who maybe haven't been to Bluedot with a version of Bluedot that they can have a look at. Because the funding had been under it to do it, we then directed everybody to donate towards Jodrell Bank. So Jodrell Bank is a deep space observatory in Cheshire, home to the Lovell telescope,
Yep.
which is 76-metre wide, absolute inspirational piece of ingenuity. And yeah, they've had a tough time. They've been closed. They get a lot of money from the visitors centre to engage people in their work. So we thought, that's something nice. Let's just remind people of the site. Let's remind them of the bigger picture of actually this incredible thing that is one of the main aspects of Bluedot. So we made it free as well.
It's amazing. I mean,
that's the thing, yeah.
The way that you've curated, not only tied it into what the event is about and the nature of it and its history, but then also tying that into helping artists out and ultimately fundraising for what is a national institution, isn't it, Jodrell Bank, in terms of, like you say, I drive past it every now and again, and it's kind of like this big sculpture as I see it in the middle of a field, that's done some amazing things for society. So the fact that you've been able to tie all that up, and it's not just not just about you as a company, but how you can help support everything else that plays a role in the festival event. I think that's amazing, mate, and hats off to you for tying all that together. That's not an easy challenge, pulling all those strings together in a single bow to make out what you did. What did the content look like then? Because you're not just music, right?
This was actually the most stressful, but in the end, the most fun bit. So yeah, it's quite square pegs and round holes, isn't it? That's all I keep going on about, square pegs and round holes. So how do you get a festival experience, which is essentially a gathering of people in a field?
Yep.
When you can't gather people in a field? But do you know what I mean? That's been the whole conundrum of like, this is like the very nature of what this isn't this?
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of had a look. How do we approach the content? We just wanted to kind of get a slice of everything, but we also wanted to make sure that what we put online was good to engage with and fun, energetic. So at Bluedot, we have an amazing musical program. We also have a science speakers program, and we also have kind of art, lots of digital art, installation art. It's all about kind of innovative, kind of boundary pushing things, So, the first year of the festival, we had Jean-Michel Jarre with his laser harp. We've had Orbisol there. We've had Chemical Brothers, and that's celebrating, innovative production, whether or not in the moment or people who innovated at the time. And then we've got people who are coming through, now, like John Hopkins, and we've got like Coco Coach, fantastic bands, fans who are doing things a bit differently. So we wanted to represent that. And then we thought really hard about how to represent the speaker side of it. We watched a few things. I kind of felt that by the time we came around to Bluedot, that having Zoom interviews with people in bedrooms just wasn't going to be exciting enough. In the dynamic of the festival environment, having professors and speakers, shoulder to shoulder with the rest of the entertainment, that's the dynamic of Bluedot. So we're like, how do we kind of frame that? So we hit upon the idea of actually launching a podcast series, which is the Bluedot podcast. Because what I wanted to do was give longevity to any content that we were doing.
Yeah.
Seeing a lot of people spending a lot of time creating content, trying to create a moment. And it's not just to draw on our own personal stuff. It's when we're reaching out to people, they're saying, how does this work? How will we do it? It's a lot of conversations. You're asking people to do things in their homes. You're asking a lot to just create content. So we wanted to make sure that anything we would create had some longevity to it for the people involved and also for the festival, for the audiences. So we managed to put together a podcast series, and we did 4 initial episodes. So the first episode was Andrianne. She was the colleague and wife of Carl Sagan.
Yep.
She was going to speak at the festival. She's just launched a new series of Cosmos. So we were lucky enough for her to come back and say she'd love to be involved. Brian Cox is then a huge fan of that. He was inspired by Carl Sagan, so there was this really nice dynamic of Brian Cox then in conversation with Robin Ince and with Anne, which is just a fantastic piece. And they spoke through how Pale Blue Dot came about, how that photograph, which is the inspiration for the festival, came about from personal experience and stuff. So that was amazing. That was like, wow, couldn't be a better opener.
Yeah.
We then had Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It was their 42nd birthday. People who know Hitchhikers will know why that's important. And they were celebrating that at Bluedot. So they then did an online panel with writers and people, prop makers involved. So that was a really nice piece of kind of sci-fi geek culture, which is a big part of Bluedot as well. It's where space and kind of sci-fi and science kind of meet. Then we had a panel on diversity in STEM. So we wanted to really get involved in that conversation and acknowledge it, but we weren't really sure how to start with. But then actually we had a look at it, and we actually did it through having a look at diversity and representation within science. Because within science and academia, you know, although we have challenges that we try and meet within music, which are ongoing, I found that within science, it's as big a problem, if not more. So we're really, really happy to be able to do that as well. And then the fourth one, we got Animatronic to speak to Jill Tarter, who is the leading person globally, I believe, in the search for extraterrestrials. So that was just like really cool.
Amazing, mate. Do you see the podcast playing a role in the festival now going forward, even when the live side of stuff comes back?
So that was the idea, really. We were looking, going, we're not sure when the live side of it's coming back. We're going to have to engage and talk to the audience in new ways. We can't just talk to them about the lineup and the bill and the tickets. So how do we do that? And we thought, well, if we spend this time and invest in the podcast and launch it through a week in an out space when we've got the attention, we'll then roll it on as a monthly thing. So we've now created this format and this way as we're on a podcast today. You know, it's a good way to engage people, and it's a good way to have a conversation around subjects. So the next, we didn't really launch the podcast per se. We just kind of invented it as part of a weekend for outer space. But we'll be doing a big kind of repackaging and launch of that with some new episodes. I think at the end of this month, and then it'll become a monthly podcast. We're tying that in with Blue Dot Journal, which we've changed our kind of newsletter format, and we relaunched the website so that people will be getting a monthly email from us with the podcast, you know, and with other roundups of things that Blue Dot's kind of partners and things are looking at. So a little bit about science, a little bit about space, a little bit about music, a little bit about well-being, that kind of stuff. So it's allowed us to kind of re-articulate the festival and the brand and the community. It's like we've gone and looked, what is our community? Who are, and when we looked at programming the festival, we thought, well, who should we involve in it? And I actually asked Emma, who's our music programmer, Roxy, who's our cultural programmer, and Will, who's our marketing director. I said, look, let's just look at it like this. We've got 4 versions of Blue Dot that we've done, one that we were going to do. Anybody who has been a part of it through that period is the Blue Dot community and family. Let's just reach out to everybody, you know. So we went out to people who'd performed before, we went out to people who'd spoken before, and we actually looked and we went, that's a huge amount of people. Yeah. Maybe had 100 speakers each time. That's like 400 or 500 speakers in science and culture. And it's like, that's a huge community and collection of people that were really excited to hear from us as well. They were like, oh, I've been going through a really hard time. We love Blue Dot. This is fantastic. Yeah, what can we do? And it was just nice to be able to actually be a positive kind of email in people's inboxes and, you know, kind of get people excited. So that's how we looked at it. So the difficulty that we really had was programming the music, because asking bands to do live streams or artists to do live streams when everybody's asking them to do live streams, and when actually they're considering doing them themselves, and they have bigger audiences than the festival, was quite difficult. And, you know, it's a tough dynamic for everybody to be working through, because brands and, you know, festivals like ours, we don't make any money from doing streams, because, I mean, I've not looked at it in depth since we started it, but when you're up against Netflix, Disney Plus and everything else, the idea of Blue Dot charging for content to be streamed is just a bit of a non-starter. So it's kind of having those conversations with agents and saying, you know, what money do you want? And they're going, well, let us know. You tell us. And then us sending a fee, which was, 500 quid or a grand or something like that. And then them just not replying because of, well, that's not worth my time. But, and I get that from both sides. And it's that difficult thing of thinking the bands we're talking to, their presence and them on a bill digitally, in your head, you think, well, they go out for that in a live space, a stream should be worth that. But from our perspective, I'm having conversations with some of the managers, and they're going, can we get this up a little bit more? It's like, I literally can't, because I've got this funding from Arts Council. Otherwise, I've just lost a load of money. I have no income for the year. There's no income to us from this. So how do we work that dynamic? And I think that'll be an ongoing conversation and an issue, really, because if I play in bands myself, you don't want to devalue yourself by being out there and not getting enough money. And, for a manager or an agent to turn to a band and go, do you want to put in all the effort to put this show together and then stream it and then do the hour stream and use the brand and all the socials and outlets for such a small amount? A lot of the bands are thinking, well, no, I probably won't bother. I'll just spend the day in the studio doing something else. So that was the difficulty of it. On the flip side, we got there with some incredible talent in the end. Orbital did a special one-off. The brothers got together and socially distanced in their home studio. That had been the first time they'd been together since lockdown, which was a lovely thing for them to do for us. And they also kind of reformed a few years ago. One of the drivers for them reforming was to play Bluedot, because they thought it was such a cool festival and they loved Jodrell Bank. So that came together really well. Ronnie Size, that was probably my highlight, actually. His set was really, really cool. That was fantastic. We had Dan Avery did something for us as well, which was super cool. He's just promoting a record that he just dropped out of nowhere at the time, so that worked for him. And then we teamed up with a festival called Negin Negin, which is out in Uganda.
Okay.
So I did some travelling around Africa a couple of years ago, got to know the guys out there. Fantastic festival, takes place at the source of the Nile. It's about 10,000 cap. Kind of a real nice emerging festival scene happening across East Africa. Really, really exciting, really, really raw. So I reached out to Derek at Negin Negin and said, is there anything we can do? So we actually used some of the Arts Council funds to commission a band called the Kampala Unit to do a set for us, which was amazing. Really, really, really cool. And then we've got BCUC from South Africa recorded a piece. And yeah, that kind of gave us the dynamic for that Saturday, where we started with some family stuff in the morning. Clangers got involved. And then in the afternoon, from lunchtime, we did the talks.
Yep.
And then from 4 or 5 o'clock, we did music through till 10 o'clock. So we just tried to keep a day's worth of fresh, new content for people to engage in. Which, as I say at the start, when you're looking at an entire festival, going, oh my God, how which bits and how, seemed like a real task. And as I say, reaching out to everyone was a little bit confused, because it's not booking, you book a band gig, everybody knows how that rolls. There was like 10 emails in every conversation of like, oh, well, how would you need the format? When would you how does this work? What do you actually want us to do? It was like, oh, what do you want to do? I don't know. We just want a thing, some cool stuff. I don't know.
And I think it's really interesting. Ben, thank you for sharing some of the, I guess, sticky points of putting all that content together, because it's very easy, I guess, to share all the highlights and the pros and the, but talking about that financial stream of it, of like the challenges of working with booking agents and artists and everybody coming together to try and make something work, both physically, but financially and digitally. I've said myself that, funnily, the kind of the online events, the live streaming, all that kind of stuff has actually lowered the bar somewhat in terms of access to be able to put what we would class as an event on, right? I personally believe that although that these sticky things are coming through at the moment as an industry, and I'm sure as festival owners and promoters and the bands themselves, you'll figure out a way to work harmoniously going forward, because that's the way that it works in the real world when the physical events happen, right? Everybody understands the benefits, and it's about audience engagement. You've got obviously a fantastic community and a network and a platform for them to have their music on or to speak. yes, okay, artists at the moment, they can switch their webcam on and they can live stream to Facebook and they can engage their community. But that community is going to still want to see them in person at live events in the future. So, I think it'll get worked out. At the moment, everybody's in a sticky situation when it comes to finances and stuff. But I'm really glad to hear that you figured it out in the way that you did, because it gives a great case study to the sector. But that I know you've got to. I'm conscious of time because I know you've got to go to the music march that's happening in Manchester today. That brings me on to kind of like one of my burning final questions, and it may be a bit too out there. It may be not something that you can answer right now, but I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are of what does the festival market look like next year in terms of lineup if live events can happen? Because in my head, I'm thinking, are artists going to want to travel internationally and have that risk? Are they wanting to just do live streams and, like just do that from the safety of their own home or their own country? What have you given that much thought? What does that look like to you in terms of festival lineups and booking artists and things like that back when live events can happen?
Well, it's interesting because at the minute we carried over the three headliners for buedot. So we've got Bjork, Metronomy, Groove Armada. We felt it was the right thing to do to kind of hold that, that sense of excitement and moment so people could look forward to that buedot. In terms of the rest of the bill, we've got a couple of things penciled, but I've actually now moved my conversation with Emma, who's our programmer on this, 3-4 weeks in a row. And I actually don't think there's any point in us looking at it right now.
Okay.
I don't, because it's so uncertain. I mean, we're chatting to bands and chatting to other promoters across kind of the region and kind of nationally. And, they're hearing back from artists moving tours, back end of this year into next spring. There's now a lot of artists moving from next spring into next autumn, or just cancelling their tours entirely from an international perspective until they know that they can do them, because there just doesn't seem any point.
Yeah.
There's also artists looking that were touring full band crews and now going down to solo shows. People are having to take a real look at it. So I don't think in the short term it's going to be easy to know, because it's not going to be led by the festivals. It's going to be led by where the availability of the talent is internationally, who can afford to tour, who sees the value in touring, and when they can make those decisions. So looking into next year, I know that there will be a huge desire from artists to play festivals because they love doing it and it's an amazing experience. And that is, for me, I'm still a little bit biased, but those festival sets and those festival summer shows that the artists do, they're like the peak of the summer. You see bands at festivals light up like, wow, this, this is the one we've been waiting for. So I know that there will be talent there. I know that there will be a huge desire from artists to play. Where that talent comes from and who that talent is, that's going to be the interesting thing. Whether or not some of the larger scale production shows and bigger touring bands won't actually be around next year, because bands might just have to make those decisions to just kind of tighten their belts in terms of their outgoings.
Sure, yeah.
That's going to be a big consideration. And I think probably, I'm literally thinking this through from yesterday, but, people having a look at looking more at regional artists that are in their locations, so that they do have the guarantee or closer guarantee that they're actually going to be at the shows. But that's interesting. Kev, some conversations yesterday about what do we do while there aren't festivals, and actually looking at artist development, looking at focusing on regional audiences, looking at going, okay, what if we're restricted in this format? Let's work with this. Let's build on this. That I think will be interesting.
And I think that the desire to attend festivals will be very much there. I remember when we launched Event Industry News, it was back in kind of that period of 2008 through to 2010, when there was, the economic crash, the recession that we had back then. And we saw an uplift in spend of people in putting money into UK-based festivals and events as their summer break, their holiday, they're getting away from things, their escapism, as you referred to earlier. So that's what I'm really hopeful for next year. Is I'm the same. I've not been away this year on holiday. Mine got cancelled from March. It's going to the back end of the year. if there was a festival that I could go to for 2 or 3 days and camp out with some mates and stuff right now, you bet I'd buy those tickets. And I think that'll carry over into next year with some uncertainty around, again, travel restrictions and all that kind of stuff. And I guess we're really lucky in the UK that we have some amazing talent and bands and homegrown artists and things like that. So I'm sure the UK lineup won't be lacking in as such. It's just really interesting to see how will it be a more UK centric lineup and international kind of stay international and stuff. Ben, I really appreciate your time coming on and giving us your experience and history and kind of what you see in the future. For anybody that's listening and wants to check out what you have available online as a weekend in outer space, if they want, is it possible to still donate to Jodrell Bank through your sites and stuff?
Yeah, so we've actually left a weekend in outer space up for longevity. So you go to Bluedot's website, which is discoverthebluedot.com, find it on there, or you go to weekendinouterspace.com, and it does what it says on the tin. So yeah, you can relive everything that we did. We did Friday night. There's a really interesting conversation and introduction from the scientists at Jodrell Bank, Tim and Teresa. There's a look back on the early years pre-Blue Dot when we did some shows there called Live from Jodrell Bank. Kind of tells the story of how those shows kind of happened with Flaming Lips, Elbow, Sigur Rós, and how that developed into this camping event. Then there's a full day's worth of Saturday stuff, which is all new content that I described earlier. And then we also on the Sunday, we ran some highlights of Blue Dot through the years, including like Hot Chip Set and stuff like that. And Hannah Peel was really stand out as well. So yeah, there's loads of stuff on there for people to explore and have a look at. And if anybody's listening and they want to get in touch, then my email's ben@fromthefields.co.uk. The one thing that I think everybody should do right now is just help each other out. And we're here as entrepreneurs, as friends, as mentors or anything. We're as From the Fields, we have or had going into COVID, best part of 5 internal events and 3 or 4 client events as festivals. And we're looking at how we work with people that, are looking to get through this, so if there's people out there who've got good ideas or, think that we might be able to help in some way, then let us know.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good suggestion. I will link all of that in the show notes as well, so people can easily reach out to you or engage with A Weekend in Outer Space. And again, thanks for coming on today's podcast. I found it really, really interesting and insightful. And, maybe next year we'll actually have a follow-up to this with a camera crew at maybe behind the scenes, an interview with you guys on site and actually show people how the show's put together.
I look forward to it. Yeah.
That's amazing, mate. Good luck at the march today. I can't be there myself, although I would be under normal circumstances. But we'll hopefully get you in another episode coming up.
Nice one. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.